Okay, welcome everybody. Good afternoon and good morning for those who are joining from the East Coast. My name is Stella Marisna Kachwala, and I am the program director for Everywhere She Maps YouthMappers. And I'm excited to have you on what I would say is our last session in this pilot crowdsourced crop identification project. We've been running this project in this remote learning series through the month of March and April. And I'm glad that after a few months of carrying out some field exercise and some extended learning, we're back to understand some of the things that we've been doing the past months, and those are really concerning the data that we have been able to collect and a few things that we've learned along the way. Today's session is an interesting one, because it's going to take us through really a wrap of most of what we've been learning. And I am happy to introduce Michael Mann, who is an associate professor at the Department of Geography from George Washington University. He's going to take us through, with his wealth of experience in data science, we're privileged that he's going to take us through the agricultural data science session that we do have today. Please take time if you have any burning questions, put them in the chat. We will pick them and post them to the presenter. And also, after his presentation, I believe we'll have an opportunity to be able to speak, open our mics and freely speak and introduce ourselves. Probably we do not have an opportunity, a chance, because we have a very limited time, and ask our questions. At the end of the session, we will collect this recording and we will make sure to post it on the YouthMappers YouTube channel, so you can find it here. But I'm also sure that so many people are recording this session and they'll be able to share it with all of us across the chapters. So once again, you're welcome. Over to you, Michael. The platform is all yours. Thank you.
Hey guys, I'm really excited to be here with you today. So Michael Mann, I'm a professor, and I should say that, like, I think that we're all at an age now where we're probably trying to figure out what's next, what we're going to do. And if I think if my story is probably telling, it was a very long and windy path. I actually started out doing economics and actually worked in Africa for a long time doing public finance. I decided I really didn't, I wasn't excited by finance at all, and wanted to do more around sort of environmental issues. Went back to school and sort of stumbled into geography and geospatial modeling. And things sort of took off from there. So, don't worry. I think we're all I think this is an age where there's a lot of uncertainty, but life is a long and windy path, and I'm sure you guys will find some great things and hopefully change the world for the better. So today we're going to be talking about some basic principles of artificial intelligence, but sort of more specifically machine learning. And I think that the goal for me today was, I think many of you, and maybe we can try this out. Let's all go down to the reactions button in Zoom, and let's just give a little thumbs up, so we can I just want to see that we all know how to use the reactions thing. So I'm going to try to use this. So find the reactions tab on the bottom. Everybody give me a thumbs up if you can. Great, I see one thumb. Let's see how many thumbs we can get here. Okay, thumbs are coming. All right, cool. So try to find that. Can folks give me a clap hand thing if you were actually in Tanzania doing the crop data collection? I'm just trying to get a sense of who's here and what I have to cover in order to get us going. Okay, Oh, all right. Few hands. All right. Um, okay, so let me just give a general summary of what happened, and hopefully we can get you caught up, and then what I'm going to present is going to make more sense. So basically, YouthMappers worked with some teams and some YouthMappers chapters in Tanzania to go out and collect some crop data. So essentially, they were going around with cell phones to a series of regions and going out into the field and collecting data. And in particular, the data that they were trying to collect or were collecting was the location of particular crops. So they were going around to farmers' fields. They were taking a photo of the field, the crops in the field, and then labeling it. Okay, is this maize? Is this wheat? Is this rice? Etc. So the sort of work that I do is I try to take data like that and turn it into something meaningful. And that is where sort of machine learning and artificial intelligence comes in. So how to translate those sort of small examples of data into something that we can use to do something bigger and answer more important questions. So let me start my screen share here. There we go. Great. Annotate toolbar on. All right. So I think that one good place to start is just thinking about where AI is being used in your sort of day-to-day life. So if we could, just in the chat, try to think about ways that you think companies or governments or individuals are using machine learning or whatever you think AI is at this moment on you as an individual. So I can sort of start out with one just to get you thinking. How many of you guys use TikTok? I'm assuming one or two of you have looked at TikTok before. So that feed predicting what you see next is 100% driven by AI, and actually a very sophisticated algorithm, right? You know, it knows, do you like sports? Do you like a particular type of dancing? Like, do you like rap or rock, right? It understands those things, and it's going to feed you more of the thing that you are interested in. And to the point where it's, down to the second, what are you interested in this week? So where else do you guys think AI is present in your lives? So let's type it into the chat. Anything? What companies do you guys, what do you use for? Okay, Google search engine. Yeah, totally. ChatGPT. Yeah, that's the hot one of the moment. Great. What else do you guys think of? What about what do you use for email? Or for do any of you guys use Google Docs? How about autocomplete? Right, so anytime that the computer is telling you what word might come next, Gmail uses it. How does Gmail use AI? Have any of you guys gotten emails that are trying to get you to send people money? Yes, to detect spam email was like one of the very early uses of AI. Yep, automatically suggesting what you're so the autocomplete. Yep, for typing. Yeah, so this stuff is grammar checkers. Awesome. Yeah, we're all right. Now we're on a roll. Plant Village Nauru app. I actually don't know Plant Village Nauru. Do you know that one, Stella?
Yes, we talked about it through our trainings in the past. Yeah,
Okay.
it's
Sorry.
a
Well,
mapping app. Yeah.
I guess I need to use that. I need to look that one up.
Okay, yeah, you better use that one because we are using it in one of the region from Tanzania, Kigoma. So
Oh,
we
great.
are using
Okay.
yeah.
Cool. I will definitely look it up. Yeah, but AI is absolutely ubiquitous and will become only more so, hopefully to our benefit and maybe to our detriment. And I'm going to maybe very briefly, we can spend a little time on generative AI at the end because it changes everything. Yeah, rapid ID, that's a good one. So this stuff comes up everywhere, from smart home devices to voice assistants, right? Translating audio into text, email in terms of like sorting, searching, advertisements, right? I mean, Google, right? The world's biggest, most influential company in the world is just an advertising company, which is insane, right? That's literally where all the money comes from. So their ability to sell ads, relevant ads that are individualized to you. Do you know why they want you to use Chrome server or Chrome browser? It's because they are literally tracking every little motion of your mouse around the screen. So, oh, they were in, I don't know, some online shopping site like Amazon or something. Did they hover over the add to cart and then they didn't do it? Oh, we'll send them an ad for that item that they were just hovering over. So whether we know it or like it or not, we are under perpetual surveillance. Surveillance tool number one being your cell phone, which has your location. Everybody knows who you are, what you're doing, who you're talking to, what your interests are, all that kind of stuff. So, anyways, it's everywhere, and people make a lot of money by following and understanding what it is you're interested in. So in terms of the geospatial industries, there's sort of a wide variety of uses of geospatial data. There's a number of big players, some of which I'm listing here. There's been a sort of push into private satellites. So there's now sort of an array of sort of smaller companies that are putting up satellites for Earth observation, observing the planet, climate change, industry, government uses, all that kind of stuff. Companies like UPS or FedEx or whatever it is are basically just geospatial logistics operations. They mostly do GIS, right? It's like, how do we get something from point A to point B the quickest and the most efficient? Google, of course, has a huge array of geospatial stuff, from Google Maps, Google Earth Engine. Those of you that are interested in using satellite imagery to do analysis at large scales, you should look at Google Earth Engine. GPS through Trimble, right? How do we, basically GPS allows us to know precisely where we are on Earth. Trimble makes very precise ones like 3 centimeter, or less precision, that are great for sort of engineering and building, right? You don't want to build the bridge in the wrong place, all that kind of stuff. Mapbox for web mapping. But there's a huge variety also of just sort of government uses, everything from urban planning, agriculture, police, defense, of course, is like a huge one. But also things like census to understand population dynamics, where people are, and what's going on in your country. So let's see, our common uses of geospatial data for sort of AI. One of this is developing as, as our capabilities have expanded. I'm just going to sort of list a few different ways that the geospatial data is being used by AI and sort of give examples of what it's for and why they do it. One big one is object detection. Clearly, there's like defense reasons that they would want to do this, right? You want to understand where the tank is or where the plane is, where it's going, all that kind of stuff. But it's also used a huge amount in sort of industrial operations. It allows you to understand how many cars are being sold, right? So like if you have a satellite that's sitting over the docks in Los Angeles, you can literally just count the number of cars coming off of boats that are going to be delivered to Americans, right? So you can understand the sort of flow of goods by sort of counting objects on the ground. How many people are in the office park? You can count the cars. All kinds of weird and interesting uses. Another big one for me is the idea of image segmentation. With satellite data, this is often used for sort of detecting the edges of a building, let's say, or detecting where particular crop fields are. So here's an example where we have, and can you guys see my mouse when I'm sort of moving around? Okay, good. I was just double checking.
Okay. Yes.
Great. So, so here's an example where we're sort of trying to delineate the different crop, or sort of different fields, because what people are planting where really matters. I do a lot of work in East Africa, and in particular around sort of detecting crop failure. So it's really good to know what crops are where and which ones are doing well and which ones aren't. And a lot of that boils down to being able to sort of break up the picture and know what's being planted where. Another huge one is this sort of idea of land use classification. And this is going to be the subject that we're going to be sort of spending the most time on in this lecture. And the idea here is converting satellite imagery, right? So we have this data that gives us information on, how red is a particular location, how blue, how green. Does it reflect other parts of the spectrum, right? Is it hot or cold? That kind of stuff. And we convert that information into something meaningful like land use classification. So here's an example, right? We're going to be able to differentiate what's forest, what's agriculture, what is built up, what is water, etc. And it allows you to sort of create a map of, what's going on where in a particular location. There's also the idea of small area estimates. This gets used more and more in developing countries because collecting census data is costly and expensive. And it's easy to get a rough estimate of, the location of poverty, let's say, at a regional level. But it's much more expensive to figure out where specific pockets of high poverty are. And one of the things that we can do with geographic data is we can sort of merge data on household income with things like nighttime lights. So places that are wealthier are often have more lights than places that don't. So you can sort of find correlations between some of these things you can observe from space and meaningful indicators on the ground. So this is an example where we worked with Belize to take sort of these regional poverty maps and to downscale them into a map of where the actual high poverty rates are in particular locations. Another example is the idea of spatial regression. And the idea here is you're trying to predict some kind of outcome. This is something I do a lot of. Here's an example of crop yield estimation. So basically, this is from a drone. So you fly this little drone over a field, and you can actually pick out, based on sort of what the plant looks like at any given year, what your expected yield is, right, from maize or wheat or whatever it is. Places that are green are going to produce a lot, places that are red are not. And this sort of gets to this new concept of targeted agriculture or high precision agriculture, where if you have information on your particular fields, you can actually understand what area you need to go in and, like, you know, put some fertilizer down, or that you have a pest problem that you have to manage. And it allows you to sort of control things in a very specific way to sort of maximize your yields. Okay, so there's some uses, but what in God's name is it? So AI to you is the ability to translate data into an outcome that's meaningful for humans, right? So if you have 10 million images and you need to assign labels to them, okay, I need to know, like, which ones are cats, right? Which ones are dogs? The ability to do that in an automated fashion almost instantaneously is super important. Text to summary, right? Like, we've all sat down to a long text that we were supposed to read and didn't quite understand it or need help understanding it. Right now we can turn to things like ChatGPT to summarize that text for us into sort of bite-sized bits that help us understand it. And, you know, or taking stuff like satellite imagery. So we have, you know, the US has a huge number of satellites, and all this data is pretty much freely available. But how do you take that satellite image of the Earth and turn it into something meaningful, right? So taking that satellite image and turning it into an estimate of what the crop yields will be next week, right? Like, are we good, or do we have a famine on our hands? Those are the sort of decision support that AI can provide to us. So AI is broken up into a few different sort of realms, I guess. There's machine learning, which is really what I have spent most of my time on recently. And basically, you're using sort of a small set of historic data, training some kind of algorithm or some kind of process that can use similar data to make predictions of, you know, outcomes. So is that a cat? What will the yields be tomorrow? What is the stock market going up or down tomorrow? Those types of questions. Deep learning is a little bit different in that I tend to think of deep learning as sort of that, maybe the cat labeling problem, where you have a photo of something and you're trying to figure out what's in the photo, how many people are in it, right? So counting the number of people, labeling it cat or dog, that kind of thing. And basically what it's doing is it's taking a single image and it's running a bunch of different filters over it that accentuate different features. So, like, if we're looking at a picture of a dog, what you'll see is that there's a lot of pixels that have sort of oriented short straight lines from the fur, right? So if you can figure out some kind of filter that can find, you know, does this image have a lot of really short straight lines in it? Okay, well, if there's a lot of short straight lines, you're probably looking at an animal. And then I guess you got to figure out whether it's a cat or a dog or a monkey or whatever it is. But if you're looking at me, right, I don't have very many short straight lines, right? Well, I guess they're really short. But they're unlikely to label me as a dog. I mean, I guess I'm a little hairy, so maybe I'll throw it off. But but you kind of get the point, right? So there's certain features in an image that can be picked up. You know, a dog is never going to have a collar on, right? So, well, not this, you know, not this type of collar. So there's different features in an image that you can pick up that will be able to tell the algorithm, okay, is this a human, an animal, etc. And then there's the idea of neural networks, and this maybe sort of gets into the generative AI realm, where you're looking at ways of recognizing patterns more sort of in line with how the human brain works. For right now, we're going to be focusing on machine learning because really this is like, you can spend 10 years on all this and it's just barely scratched the surface. And we only have a little bit of time here. So when we're doing machine learning, we have sort of two different types of objectives. And the type of model you choose is based on what it is you're trying to do. So the two types of objectives are classification and regression. Classification is when you're trying to put a label on something, right? Am I looking, so this is just an example where I set up a small camera outside of my house, and I was taking photos of the street, and I was trying to label the types of cars that were driving by. And the number there is the likelihood that the algorithm thinks that there is a, the FedEx truck, or et cetera. So classification is applying a label. Maybe it's different types of crops. Maybe it's the model of the car. Regression is trying to predict some kind of numeric output, right? Trying to find a relationship between years of experience in the workforce and the amount of money you make, stuff like that. So regression is when you have a numeric output. Classification is when you have this sort of categorical thing that you're trying to predict. So a few of you here were out collecting data in the fields in Tanzania. And here is some of the actual data that you collected overlaid with the Google Earth base layer image of the day, whatever, I don't even know what time period it was. Clearly not much was growing at this moment that satellite flew over. And we have a few different locations where you guys went to, and you took a photo of that field. You labeled it sorghum, sunflower, or rice. And with this data, we have to figure out what our objective is. What type of data do we have here? Do we have a classification problem, or do we have a regression problem? And let's do this in the, let's see if we can do this in the, I wish I could see everybody. Hold on. Nope. Let's do it in the chat, I guess. So do you guys think it's classification or regression? So we have some data here. What do you guys think we're going to be doing? And there's no wrong answers. Just somebody take a risk. Classification. All right, we're on a roll. Why classification? Somebody want to jump in there really briefly since time is short? Why classification? Anybody? Because of labels. Okay, all right, there we go. Awesome. Yeah, so we have labels, right? And now we want to sort of be able to use those labels and predict them to new locations. So we have a classification issue here, right? Like, how do we convert these few examples of different land types into a map of all the different crops in this particular area? So there's sort of two main categories of classification methods. One is called unsupervised, the other is called supervised. Unsupervised means finding patterns in the data without any predefined class labels. So this is as if you guys had never gone to the field, you had never collected data. All we have is the data itself. We sort of look at it, we're like, oh, it looks like these guys are pretty similar and these guys are pretty similar. So I'll call this group 1, this group 2, group 3, group 4, group 5. The other one is where we have supervised learning, and this is where class labels are provided, which you guys have very graciously provided to us. So the supervised example, we actually have examples of what, maize looks like. So maybe this is class 1, class 2 here is maize, and class 1 here is sorghum. And we can, because we can sort of see that these are differentiable, we can sort of come up with some rule to divide them into separate groups. Okay, so to start, we're going to be looking at unsupervised learning. Unsupervised learning. So we have an image here on the left, and on the right, we have a sort of axis, right? So here we have low red, high red. So we're going to be taking individual pixels from here, putting them onto this, and saying, okay, how green or red was any given pixel in this image? And we're going to sort of one by one be placing these. So we just grabbed one from up here, I guess, because it's pretty red and not very green at all, right? So low green, high red. Let's keep adding pixels in here. Oh, there's something from the forest. Okay, we got some ones from the forest there. Some more from the soil, some more from the forest. We're going to sort of keep making little piles of examples here. And notice that we have no class labels. Like, I don't know what these things are, right? Like, all I know at the moment is like some are green, some are red. But the nice thing is that they seem to be breaking themselves into two groups, right? They seem to be pretty differentiable. So how do we make a rule to break these into two distinct groups? Like, what could we do here? We're going to create what's called a classification rule. I'm going to draw this little line here, and I say this line is what breaks group 1 from group 2. I don't know what those groups are because, one's red, one's green, and like that's all the computer knows right now. But it's saying, hey, these are pretty differentiable, right? I'm going to draw this line, and anything above this line is going to be in this group 1. Everything below is in group 2. So we'll just assign some class names to them. So what would you assign? What class name would you assign to this group 1 here in red? Is it like maize? Is it forest? Is it water? Is it soil? Why don't you add your answers into the chat? Bare land. Nice. Yeah, I think that's a great one, right? Like, we don't really know. Like, I mean, I can tell as a human, like, it looks like there's some plots there. It looks like they're probably going to plant some crops, but like right now it's just sort of bare land. And then how about this group down here, group 2? What class label would you apply to it? Yeah, forest, vegetation, perfect. Nailed it. Shrubs, yeah. So, I just put soil, vegetation, right? But with unsupervised classification, you feed the computer data, you try to come up with some classification rule to differentiate those different groups. And then on the back end, the human has to look at those groups and say, okay, group 1 was soil, group 2 was vegetation. And it's sort of up to the human and the back end to assign the class names. Okay, so now we can use that tool in order to classify new locations. So we now have this trained model here. We have the classification rule, and I'm going to start throwing in some locations of pixels that we haven't seen before, maybe from like over here, right? Maybe this guy is like right there. Maybe, this guy is from over here. So for any new, anything that the computer has never seen before, we can now use this classification rule to assign their class, right? So we're going to add in some more unknown locations. Oops, I don't know why that guy flew away. Sorry about that. And in the end, we can use our classification rule on those unknown locations and apply that rule to all of the places, right? Did the computer do a perfect job? No, it did not, right? But it did a really good job. And I imagine if you had to go into this and trace by hand all of the vegetation, right? Like this would take, it would take at least, 15, 20 minutes, right? If you're gonna get all the bushes and stuff. If you do it by computer, and this is not particularly well done, so I apologize, but it's an example. When you do it with a computer, you can do it almost instantaneously. So we trained a model, and then we applied that classification rule to all the locations to predict their sort of output class. The way that I did that is something called the k-means classifier. So basically what it's trying to do is it's trying to find k groups. So you actually have to tell it how many groups to find. In this case, we would say, hey, k equals 2, right? Because we have soil and vegetation. So it goes into the data set and finds the number of classes that it tells you to do. And the way that it does this is essentially, if we look at this data example here, and sorry, it's just going to keep moving and it's a little hard to describe while it's moving. But we can kind of see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4 different distinct groups of data. The way that the process starts now is with some random locations. We're going to see it restart the video here in a second. Okay, start with some random locations, and it's going to move the center of these groups around until what's inside of a particular group is more similar or closer than what's outside of a particular group. And it's doing what it's called is reducing the cluster sum of squares. And when we watch this thing repeat, you're going to see this. Basically, we're minimizing basically trying to make the things within a group more similar than those that are outside of a group. And as that happens, we see this line drop until we sort of find our sort of final groupings here. And that's the basic idea of k-means classification. So I thought that we could it might be useful, hopefully it will be, to actually see this in Python. So you guys should have access to this through the calendar invite. You should be able to download it, but for now you can sort of maybe follow along with me. I know that many of you have not done Python before. A few of you might have, but Python's a really flexible computer language that allows you to do all kinds of stuff, from machine learning to, I don't know, you can use satellite data, you can be a doctor and trying to predict cancer, you can be I don't know, you can generate web pages, all kinds of stuff, very flexible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import some tools for me to use in this example. And I'm going to read in some training data. And this training data is actually the data that some of you guys collected in the field. So it's the locations of places and the labels of the crops for those locations. And I'm setting up a little visualization function that I'm going to use that you can ignore. So what I'm going to be doing this classification based on is 2 images that I downloaded for free from Google Earth Engine. And in particular, I'm getting what's called EVI, which is Enhanced Vegetation Index. It's basically just a measure of how green is a location at a particular time. So the higher the number here, the more yellow, which I know isn't super intuitive, the greener it is. And the darker here is how is less green. So probably down here is exposed soil, and then here is some vegetation. And then interestingly here we have some 0 values. That's a cloud. So welcome to the bane of existence for people doing work with satellite images. clouds are a nightmare. And it'd be much nicer if clouds didn't exist for us. And you will see this cloud, the problem with the cloud, later in our little example here. So all I'm doing here is I'm taking these two images and I'm going to fit our k-means clustering algorithm. So here I'm going to say, hey, I want you to find 5 different groups of data. So the number of clusters is 5. I'm going to read in those 2 dates of images, and then I'm going to sort of fit and predict our model and then plot it out here. And what you'll see is on the output, although ignore the sort of fractional things here, it's actually 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 are the 5 different classes. There's not one, 0.5 doesn't actually exist here. This is categorical output. But you'll see that it has now broken that image up into these different class labels, and there should be 5 distinct colors. But we don't really know what's happening on the ground here, right? Like, it looked at that image and it just tried to find those similar groupings and applied a number to them. And now we're looking at the output, and it's sort of up to the human to say, okay, well, from the satellite imagery, I could see that this was like a forest, and then it looks like these are all different types of agriculture. But honestly, from a satellite, you're probably not going to know what is being planted there, right? It could be sorghum, it could be wheat, it could be rice, and you'll probably not be able to tell from a satellite image. To give you an example of how it actually assigned those clusters, here is EVI for day 90. Here is EVI for day 181. This is out of 365 days, right? This is the greenness at day 181, the greenness at day 90. And this is how it chopped up the data into those 5 different groups. You can kind of ignore the dots for now. Okay, so back to our slideshow here. So supervised learning, right? We now have labels that you guys have provided. So supervised learning is very different. The way that supervised learning is going to work is you're going to sort of capture the information for particular locations, let's say, in this example. And we're going to, somebody raised the hand. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for the floor, Dr. Michael. I just have one question. Can we have the same result doing this same process using the k-means algorithm on R?
Yes, you can.
Using
R.
R.
In R. Yeah, you can use R. Yeah, k-means is available. You can use the raster package. And I guess I don't remember the k-means function or where to do it, but you can certainly use R to do it. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. I will try.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, and basically pretty much anything you can do in Python, you can do in R. I use Python because the sizes of the data I use are enormous, and R is not particularly good at memory management. So there's nothing wrong with R, but when you scale it up to huge problems, it tends to fall apart. But it is in many ways a better language to learn how to program on. So I don't want to poo-poo it too much. Okay, so we can kind of look at this data here, and we can, for any particular location, we can look at how green, blue, red, or near IR, which I know many of you don't know what it is, but the electromagnetic spectrum is quite extensive, right? We see red, blue, green, and red, and that sort of gives us the images that we see. But there's other parts of the electromagnetic spectrum, things that we can't really see, but sensors can. So near infrared provides a lot of information that is relevant to vegetation. Right, and we can kind of look at this data and figure out which ones are kind of similar, right? Like this one is a little bit similar to this. Maybe these two are similar because they have really high near infrared. These two have really low near infrared. So maybe those are similar. And we can sort of see if for any given location, we can actually like assign the true value to it, right? So we know that site 1 was water, right? Somebody was there, took a picture of it, it was water. Site 2 was vegetation, right? They were there, they confirmed it. 3 was water, soil, etc. And you can kind of see how there's similarities in particular class types, right? And that's what the computer is looking for. Once it has a class label, it's trying to figure out what makes vegetation look like vegetation. Is it that high near infrared, or, in the case of water, really low near infrared? So let's take our example again, right? We have rice, sorghum, and sunflower. So let's put some rice examples on the board, right? We know that rice takes a lot of water to grow, so we're looking at an indication of water. It is both, very wet at some point in the year and very green, right? So here's our rice, and notice how each pixel I've grabbed here has a label assigned to it. It has that R already assigned there, right? So we know what it is because somebody has actually been to the ground and visited there. We're going to make our little piles of data, of examples of rice. Now we're going to grab the data for sorghum, which is less green and less wet throughout the year, and we're going to make a little pile for sorghum. Oops. I don't know why that happened. Sorry about that. Man, we're really going to stack some sorghum today. So in the end, what we end up with is a very similar issue, right, as before, right? We have our little piles of data that are hopefully very different from each other. And in this case, we actually know what they are, right? This is sorghum, this is rice. And then we have to create a classification rule just as before. How do we differentiate those two groups? Well, anything that's above this in water, right, is probably rice. Everything that's below it is probably water. It's probably sorghum. And that looks like a good classification rule. And now we can take examples, right, that we haven't seen, like from over here. We have no training data over here. So we place that on the board. Where does it land? Right, it's sorghum. We can place, oh, damn it. All my things are backfiring on me. Right, we can place an unknown location over here, down. Okay, it's just above that classification rule, so we're going to assume that that is rice. Oops, I think I copied and pasted the wrong slide. So in the end, what you can do with this is you can take any new location, put that data down onto the board here in the little piles, right? And you can apply your classification rule and assign labels to places that you have no data from. If we take that example, right, and we apply it to a variety of different land cover classes like urban, sand, corn, forest, and water, you can imagine we can make our little stacks of blocks for all those different classes, right? It's pretty easy to differentiate sand, right? Sand is going to be like hot and red. So that's pretty different than everything else. And we can differentiate forest, but maybe differentiating corn and hay gets a little more complicated. Maybe some of those stacks start overlapping each other a little bit, right? Sometimes corn can be, green, very green, or very brown or whatever, just like hay. And what you can observe from space is pretty limited. So oftentimes there's going to be confusion, and it isn't very easy to draw your classification rule, or whenever you do draw your rule, it's going to make some mistakes. and that's okay. But in the end, what you're going to do is for any unknown data, you're going to plop it down here. In this case, it looks like it is probabilistically is going to be water, right? If we plop one down here, okay, this is probably corn. If we plop one here, it's probably urban, right? So you can sort of probabilistically determine which group any new location might be assigned to. So in the same way, we're going to take these two EVI images and the data that you guys actually collected, and we're going to look at the data. I'm going to pull the data from these two dates for these locations where the dots are, and the different colors are the different crop types. So here's the coordinates. Here's the EVI values for early in the year and sort of mid-year. And here's the class labels. Right, so it's not very much information. We're working with very little information, just how green it is at two different periods. And we have our sort of class labels that you guys collected. So this is what's called the training data set, right? So we are going to train a model on this and try to get the computer to find patterns. And then we're going to try to predict. So in this first one, let's take a look at sort of the training data and see if we can come up with our own mental machine learning model and try to predict what class this might be. Does anybody want to guess what class this unknown location might be based on the patterns we see up here? And if you guys are feeling brave, type it into the chat. Rice. Okay, cool. Yeah, so it looks like, right, there's high values for both of these days, right? And it looks like rice is the only one that has high greenness values for both of these periods. So we don't know, we are not 100% certain, but there's a pretty decent probability that this is rice. Now, how about this one? How about this one?
Sorghum.
Sorghum, right? So it's sort of in the mid to high 1000s, and then 3000 plus. And it looks like sorghum tends to follow a similar pattern, not universally, but like, yeah, maybe it's sorghum, right? This might be a challenging one, but maybe it's sorghum. So great, you guys are doing supervised learning. And this is literally all the computer's doing, except it's doing it in sort of using a bunch of math, but it's trying to find those relationships in the data and then use it to predict it to unknown locations, right? So taking that training data, trying to predict some outcome based on it. So let's open up that this thing again. Let's go to supervised classification. Again, just starting with the data. And we can kind of look at the data set. In order for the machine to do work on machine learning, you actually have to take these text classes and convert them into codes. So I'm going to recode millet as 0, rice as 1, sorghum as 2. And then we use the computer to predict 0, 1, 2, or 3. So here's our data, right? Location, greenness at the two time periods, our land cover code that we're going to use to train the model. And here I'm going to open up our data again, the two images from the two different periods in 2023. And we're going to fit what's called a Gaussian naive Bayes model. It's pretty similar to the one that I just described to you, those sort of creating the stacks, trying to figure out which one it was likely to be, which stack a new one is likely to be a member to. And we're looking at the output now. So we have our different labels assigned here. And we can see that like it's made some predictions of what the different land cover classes are and where. And we can look at the classification rule, and you'll see that, you know, we are fitting the data, and this is a little bit different in that, like, it actually knows what the classes are. So let's say these light blue ones are rice, and these are sorghum, and this is millet in red. And what it's trying to do is it's trying to find a way to lump all the blue ones together, all the yellow ones together, all the red ones together, and the purple one. And you'll see, you're noticing that it's not doing a particularly good job, right? And that is because differentiating rice, sorghum, and millet using just greenness for two different periods is really, really difficult, right? These are not easily differentiatable groups. Like, it looks like the blue ones are the maybe easiest to separate out. And maybe the yellow, we did a pretty good job, but whatever red and purple is, like, they're kind of all over the map, and we didn't do a great job differentiating the groups. So, you know, we've created this map, but looking at this, I'm not highly confident that it did an awesome job. Like, it did an okay job doing it. I'm also going to show you something called a random forest, because this is the one that I use the most in my work. It tends to be really good with satellite imagery. It does the same type of thing of sort of trying to lump the blue and the yellow and the red together, but it does it in a sort of in a very unstructured way. So everything in pink here, or sort of this, I don't know, yeah, I guess it's pinkish, is the yellow class. Everything in white, it's assigning red. Everything in the sort of off green or off yellow, it's assigning to the blue class. So random forests allow you to sort of find much more complex relationships and assign classes based on those complex relationships. In the end, we always want to know, like, how did we do? Like, did we do a good job or a bad job of predicting our outcomes? This is called a confusion matrix, and it is well named because it's confusing the first time you see it. But remember, we had our different land classes. Okay, so sorghum, rice, millet, etc., and we recoded them as numbers. So let's look at the bottom. So ideally, what we'd have is, for every example of a zero class, let's just call it sorghum, we would have the true label as 0 and the predicted label as 0, and we count 1 on the scoreboard here. Yay, we did a good job, right? There was an example of 0, and we labeled it as 0, and it's here. Awesome. So now let's move on to millet, let's say, because I'm forgetting what's what. Oh, wait, I have it right here. Okay, sorry. 0 is millet, 1 is rice. So, okay, we had rice. In 2 examples, we took rice and we labeled it rice. Yay, we got 2 of those right. And for 1 of them, it was rice, but we labeled it sorghum instead. For sorghum, right, class 2, we got 8 of them correct, right? We labeled 2, and we got 3 of them wrong because we labeled them as sunflower. So ideally, the ideal situation would be all the numbers are here, right? That means we got them all correct. Anything that's off of that diagonal means you got something wrong. And in the end, we can sort of measure, you know, what was our accuracy. We got about 74% of them right using our random forest classifier, which is fine given that we had very limited training data and doing sort of a simple classification. Okay, so that gets us pretty close to the end here. I guess I wanted to sort of tie this back to, like, why did we actually have YouthMappers out in the field doing this work? You know, what will the data be used for? And you sort of got an example of potential uses for it. right, is the idea that we are providing data so that scientists can go out and understand what's happening on the ground in Tanzania in terms of what people are planting, where and when. And maybe that seems like a banal question, but it's super, super important when people want to understand sort of food security and global markets, right? Like, I'm sure the Tanzanian government would love to know whether people are producing too much rice or whatever it is, right? Or if the rice crop is about to fail, right? Those are really, really important things to know and have impact. We're going to be sharing our data. I think, is this correct, Stella? Yes. Okay, great. We're going to be sharing the data that you guys collected once we've got it all cleaned up and make sure that everything's in the format that they need with something called the Radiant Earth Foundation. And what this is sort of an open resource of training data from around the world, and where any researcher or any group can submit their training data here. So, if we go into the agricultural data sets, we can go through and actually look at what data has been provided. So we can look at, there's a Mali crop type data, and it gives a description of where and when the data was collected, by who, what questions were they asking, what crops did they collect. So by building this sort of free and open repository that any researcher can use, it hopefully enables access from people like you, from people like me, to go and utilize that data and come up with better answers for tomorrow. And I really appreciate YouthMappers, and I'm really excited by your participation. And I think that, one of the big things going forward, right, is that there's so much of the earth that is, well, I guess everything's mapped, but the real critical issue now is that things are not labeled, and particularly in developing countries, right? Like, okay, it's a building, but like, is it a hospital? Is it a pharmacy? If it's a pharmacy, when are they open? What do they sell, right? Like, this is really, really important data. And that is stuff that I, as a satellite user, will never be able to provide, right? Like, you guys are the brains on the ground and have the local knowledge. And I hope that you guys figure out ways to leverage it so that Africa profits from it, you guys profit from it, rather than just the Googles of the world. So be careful not to give too much data away, but make sure that if you are giving data away, that you figure out a way to make a living or do something good with it on your end. Okay, so that sort of wraps up what I wanted to do for the day. Time is limited, and I don't want to put you all to sleep. The conversation about machine learning is broad. There's, God, things are changing so fast, but I guess I wanted to make sure that you guys had some access to some tools that I think are useful. For those of you that are just interested in getting started with programming, there are, one of them, if you're learning in R, there's this swirl that gives you sort of a few different courses that you can complete, from sort of basic R to like data handling to machine learning. It's a pretty cool tool. If you're using Python, this is the one that I use in my class. It's Python Crash Course, teaches you good basics of programming. And if you're sort of already have the basics, I have some examples of some decent machine learning, data science things, most of which are free. For Python, I particularly like this Python Science Data Handbook. And also, this is a fantastic Coursera course. I actually took it myself when I was just learning Python and trying to, bridge my way into from what's called econometrics into machine learning. So, keep your eye on Coursera and sort of these really or relatively, I should say, inexpensive learning tools. And I did want to, I mean, yeah, I should open up to questions, but I did want to sort of broach the idea of generative AI, because I think this is the thing that keeps me up at night. I think in general, for the moment, this is going to be a fantastic tool, especially for young people like yourself, that I think it's just going to level the playing field in so many ways, right? I think that people like myself grew up in an environment where I was very isolated, right? I had access to high quality education, lots of support, and I had access to tools and learning that, you know, the vast majority of the world did not have access to. And with ChatGPT and tools like it, you guys now basically have access to all the knowledge that I and people like myself had pretty, you know, had control over, to be perfectly honest. And I think that it's worth sort of discussing it a little bit and like maybe talking to you a little bit about how it works and like ways to use it that will be really helpful and things to watch out for. I literally was like up at night thinking about this, and I haven't really developed the lecture slides, so I'm going to kind of go off the cuff here. But I thought it might be interesting for you guys to understand what generative AI is and what makes it different than machine learning, traditional machine learning. So here's an example of, how many of you guys have heard of DALL-E? DALL-E is the sort of image generation. Let's see here. Text to image generation. Okay, so we can type in like man on moon with cow, right? So what it's doing right now is, well, I guess I'll explain what it's doing once we see the output. Okay, so it took this text prompt and tried to translate it into an image for us. And this is mind-boggling to me, right? Like, this is so creative, really interesting, really detailed. We have different styles. It's wild, right? So the way that this works is you have, let's say, 10 billion pictures of cats. So you take each one of those individual images and you say, you give it this first one here and you say, okay, hey computer, this is an image of a cat. And you do that for all 10 billion images. Then you add noise to those same images and you say, hey computer, this is a cat. And it learns that relationship. Okay, this is a cat. Then you add more noise and you say, hey, this is a cat. And it learns the relationship between this and this. And then you go even this far and you say, hey, this is a cat. And it basically, this allows, the sort of final step allows you to then give it an image of this and a text prompt. And you can say, hey, computer, this staticky noise image is a cat. And what it does is it, using this random noise here, it remembers all these relationships between these noisy images and cats, and it works backwards to an image of a cat. So yeah, and sorry, I know I'm carrying on, I'm carrying on a little too long. So if you guys need to take off, feel free. And Stella, is it okay that I'm going on this rant? Okay.
Yes, we're still here. Yay.
So basically by adding noise, it allows it to take random noise like this and convert it back to an image. And that's all it's doing here. Is it fed 4 different times, it fed random noise and said, this is a man on a moon with a cow. And that it took that random noise and converted it to an image. Then it gave it other random noise, said man on the moon with a cow, converted it to an image, etc. So every time will be unique because the random noise it gave it was unique. And the relationships and its relationship of that random noise to a man on the moon with a cow changes every time. And you end up with weird things like ladders in a cow's butt. But but in general, right, there's a lot of power here. And the tools like ChatGPT are not totally dissimilar, except for ChatGPT and this type of generative AI is a little bit different. I have been using it extensively recently. I initially got into it because I was not sure like what it was able to do, whether I had to be worried about my students using it or not. Like, are they gonna be cheating or I don't know, those are the things that teachers worry about. But I think that it's this point, I think it's just going to be a brilliant learning tool. And I was thinking I could just give you a few tips for how to use it. I mean, first of all, you all need to go onto ChatGPT. You need to learn how to use this because this changes everything. And the world will not be the same going forward. I'm pretty damn certain of that. So I can give you some sort of introductory pointers here. And I think that you guys also need to spend some time learning how to use it, learning what it's good at, learning what it's not good at, because it is essentially a bullshit engine or a plagiarism engine or whatever. And sometimes it gets it really right, sometimes it gets it really wrong. And I think that the value these days will being able to tell when it's doing the right thing and when it's doing the wrong thing, because it's going to be able to automate a lot of what humans do, for better or worse. And there's, that is part of a much longer and philosophical question. But whenever I'm using chat these days, I always start with a priming prompt. So I'm going to open up a new chat and you'll see that I have a whole bunch of things. Arduino C++ expert, YouthMappers technical writer, remote sensing expert, Python data scientist assistant, geography graduate advisor, right? So all the different sort of tasks that I are prompting it with, I start with a new chat and I say, hey, you are now a technical, oops, if I can spell, expert, I can't spell, and GIS and remote sensing. You will only tell me what you are sure of. So giving it sort of a detailed prompt of what it is, what it needs to do, and sort of priming it to give you good answers. Even complimenting it, saying like, if it starts giving you the wrong answer, to say, hey, I thought you were more amazing than this, and it'll actually go back and give you a better answer, which sounds great. So start off with a prompt like that. And now let's say, I want to read a shapefile into a computer using Python. So what it's going to do, hopefully, is give me some instructions on how I can do this and using what tools. Right, so GeoPandas is the right answer. This is a library I use all the time. It's telling you how to install GeoPandas. It's showing you how to import it once you're in Python, how to open up your file and take a look at the contents. My number one recommendation to you guys, since you're still learning this, is you have to understand what is going on here. If you guys start copying and pasting and this becomes your brain, your value to the world is zero, right? Because you can just be replaced by the computer. So what you have to leverage this tool in order to learn and understand what it is it's doing and why, so that then you can, once you get the baseline of Python or whatever the technical expertise is that you're learning, you can leverage that and do something that other people can't get ChatGPT to do, because you have all the baseline understanding, you know how to prompt it properly to do all the things that you need it to do. If you turn your brain off, this will be useless to you. So take the time, understand what it's doing, look at every data object, read. If you don't know what it is, right, like you can copy and paste code in, so let's see here, I'll pull up some code that I have, right, and explain the following code to me. If you run into code, you're not sure what it's doing, right? You can have this actually explain line by line what it's doing, why it's doing it, right? So this is a fantastic tool, but only if you understand what it's doing. And one of the big reasons you have to understand is because it's also a bullshit engine, right? It will tell you what you want to hear, whether you like it or not. So I'm going to ask it to do something I know it can't do. Use GeoWombat, which is a Python thing that I've been working on for a long time, to do cloud removal from a satellite image. Can't type today. So it is telling us to do something that I know for 100% with 100% confidence that it cannot do. There is no function in GeoWombat called remove clouds. It just completely bullshitted this. And I mean, it looks great, but if you type this into your computer, it will not go, right? Because this does not exist. I mean, it got some things right. ToRaster exists. GW Open exists. It made this part up, right? But the point is, right, like you have to leverage this to become an expert. And an expert is the one that can tell when it's going down the wrong path and point it in the right direction, or know that it's just making something up. So I should cut it off at there. I feel like I could talk about generative AI for days, but hopefully this example will sort of help you leverage it. And I guess we can, Stella, should we just open it up to question and answer for a little bit? Or?
Yes, it's a perfect time.
Great. So if anybody has any questions, feel free.
Feel free to open your mic and ask your question or make your comment. You can also use the chat to type your question.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes,
Yep,
we can hear you.
Nope. And he's gone away. Everybody's a little shy. There's nothing to be shy about, guys. I don't bite. Questions, concerns? Have you guys started using ChatGPT at all?
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I couldn't hear you last time when I tried to ask the question.
Okay.
Thank you so much for this incredible lesson. I learned a lot. I've been using R for some time, and I think someone asked if you could use R using k-means and so on and so forth, and you said something about limitations when the code is a lot. So we had some competition in Zindi, and I think I faced the same problem with R because of memory management, and the computer will freeze sometime.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask in Python, what's the difference? Using the same projects, can I manage much better memory management? The laptop,
yeah, I mean,
maybe.
a good basic example of why R's memory management is poor. So when you're reading in a Excel file, right, into memory, and let's say you want to replace one row in that Excel file. So in R, the way that it works is you have your RAM, right? So you have the small amount of memory that you can actually run operations on. So you need to be really careful about what comes into your RAM, because there's, you maybe only have 8 gigabytes or whatever. So in R, if you want to replace one row in that table of data, you have to bring the whole table in, replace that one row, and then write that whole table out. And that's because R data objects aren't generally, not all of them, aren't generally properly indexed, meaning that it doesn't have, just by looking at the data without bringing it in, it doesn't know how many rows there are there or how to access any individual row. So in Python, rather than reading in the whole file, what it does is it says, oh, you're looking for, index number 13. So it goes down to the 13th column. It grabs that 13th column, brings that 13th column into memory. You update it whatever you want, and then you write that column back out into the table, right? So, if this table is 2 billion, rows long, right, you can see how big of a difference that can be. There are tools for R that are properly indexed and are quite fast and run in C. If I'm remembering, sorry, it's been a while since I've used R for this stuff, but I think it's called data table. So if you're dealing with really large data sets and you're trying to replace values or something like that, you can use data table. But there's sort of workarounds in R for those problems. So you might ask ChatGPT, what is the most memory efficient way of doing X, Y, and Z? And it might be able to give you some good recommendations, because I'm sure this is developing a lot, right? And I think that, I only moved to Python because, I'm dealing with trillions of observations rather than, a few million. So if you don't see yourself running into those problems, I'd stick with R, or, I hate to say it, but try to upgrade the RAM in your computer, and maybe that will help fix the problem. Yeah, I don't know. That's what I got. Any other questions, or did that answer your question? Maybe I should.
Yes, that definitely did. Thank you. And one follow-up question.
Sure.
So how about visualization? I think this is one of the big things that I used R for. It's easy to visualize.
Yeah.
So how does it work in Python?
I like data visualization in R better than Python. So if, I actually go back to R for data visualization, so no problems there. Yeah, if you're used to ggplot or whatever, stick with it. Let's see here.
Yeah, the comment section really has, I think, mostly appreciation of the session.
Nice.
Yeah.
Great.
Most of the people, thank you for the lesson. I have really enjoyed myself. And it's really good feedback to have. Thank you so much, guys. Any extra questions? Yes, Baraka. Yeah, I know Baraka was the supervisor. Yes.
Hello.
Yep.
Yes.
We hear you.
I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, now I'm having a question when it comes to intercropping, because I was coordinating this project in the region of Dodoma, where most of the crops were actually intercropped.
Yeah.
Now, how can these sample data be used? Are they anyhow useful at all?
It depends. This is why Africa is so challenging, right? So in the States, when you have wheat, you literally have clear to the horizon an ocean of wheat. In Africa, intercropping is super common. And the way that we're trying to approach this is is by getting higher resolution imagery and hopefully higher resolution training data. So if we know exactly where those plants are, if we have imagery that rather than being MODIS is 250 meters on each side, right? That's not going to work very well in the African context. Landsat is 30 meters on each side. Okay, you're getting better. Sentinel, now your pixels are 10 meters by 10 meters. Planet Labs data, you're down to, I think they have meter pixels.
Yeah.
And
no,
so by using that higher and higher resolution data, hopefully we can disentangle some of those fields. But if they're truly intercropped, like row by row, there's basically no way we can do that unless we're flying drones over Africa. And God help us that drones are cool, but nightmare also.
Yeah.
Okay, I was having a follow-up questions.
Yeah, sure.
Is there no any other way of saying, like, if 2 or 3 crops are intercropped, you take that sample and you draw conclusion from to other areas using the same as intercrop? Let's say if it's maize and sorghum together, then you take that sample and you draw conclusion from other areas where they are also intercropped. There are no any other mechanism of such kind?
Having the problem is we don't have data that's labeled that specifically. Like if we had a ton of an enormous amount of data where we had examples of all these different intercrop pairings, maybe we could get at that. But right now there's so little data available, particularly for Africa. And you have that sort of complexity in addition that like the African context is so complex, right? Like in the US, you can just say, oh, it's like green on like the 35th of May, it's wheat, right? Because everybody is literally planting their crops at exactly the same time, right? So a big part of it in Africa is like everybody's doing, not only is it intercrop, but everybody's doing things at different times. Right, there are different elevation profiles, right? I think it's perfectly reasonable that they're making those choices, but from a modeling perspective, it's so complex. So I think that at this point, we're just trying to get like, can we do a reasonable job at getting the medium to large size fields? And if we can do that, then hopefully someday we'll have enough data to get the small fields, the intercrops. But I think we're a little ways off from that still. The satellite imagery, like as you get to finer resolution data, is also not as high quality. So Planet Labs is this private company that they have thousands of tiny satellites, like literally like shoebox things floating around in space. And they literally like took basically a DSLR camera that you could, I mean, a little fancier than that, but like a camera that you could buy on the street and attach that thing to the satellite and like lobbed it up into space. And the issue is that like, okay, you have high precision data, right? It's very fine, small pixels, but the quality of every individual image changes. Every satellite is different, right? So like, there's all kinds of problems. So there's a lot of sort of technical barriers as well. Sorry, that's a long-winded answer, but. Yeah, so vegetation index based on the height of crops. Yeah, so the height is a really interesting idea. The issue is that capturing height is challenging, right? There are sensors like radar that can do that, but they tend to be very coarse resolution. So you can tell the height of like a city block, but not like the height of an individual like part of a plot. There's some sensors do a better job, but it's like, again, right, this is the bleeding edge of remote sensing. Like, how do we get height data at really fine scale over broad areas? Like, it's easy to do in one place, right? You bring what's called a LiDAR, it shoots lasers around and it calculates the heights of everything. but you can't do that everywhere, right? So how do you do it from space? Yeah, so there's lots of potential solutions, but there's still limitations. Anybody else? Okay, so I guess we'll sort of leave it at that. Yeah, hopefully this sort of gave you a little background into how machine learning works. And I guess the good part, I hope, is that like that the process is relatively intuitive, right? Once you get to see it. And I think now with things like ChatGPT, right, the playing field has been leveled, and you have a unique moment in human history. Like I heard Jeff Bezos said this is the most important thing since fire, which is an astounding statement. So we live in a new era. Hopefully it will work for the better. But I think that you know, make use of these tools and also be responsible, right? Like you guys are the future, so be good, do good, and yeah, I hope you fix all the world's problems for me.
Yes, thank you so much, Michael.
Okay.
I can see, while you were taking us through the session, I came up with an idea, say, why not a poll, as a way of us signing out of this session. You guys have been amazing. Thank you for all the questions. So I'll go ahead and launch this poll. It's just 2 questions, interesting questions. One just about the session, and then just another funny one to sign us out. Okay, so you should be receiving the poll on your screen. Are you able to get it? Okay, you can see answers are starting to come in. Wonderful.
Oh no, cats are winning. Don't let cats win.
I am seeing
Come on,
cats
dog
winning.
people. Come on, dog people.
Okay, dogs are taking over now.
There we go. No, stay away, cats.
Okay. Let's see. Extra a few minutes and then we'll close the chat. Come on, people. More 19 people, please. Okay. There we go.
Yeah, cats, I mean, I do love, they're very sweet, but I'm allergic to them. And here's a little fun fact for cats. So your average cat in America kills 3.5 animals a day, which means that if you multiply by all the cats they think live in the US, cats kill like 3 billion small animals a year. So like all the songbirds, all the cats, like they're lovely. But keep them, if you have a cat, keep it in your house, please.
I love cats. I love cats. I'm just allergic to their food. The food they eat here.
Really? That's funny.
Yeah. Interesting.
All right. Well, I'm glad dogs
okay, so dogs are winning. That's interesting. I know. Okay. I guess I'll end the poll here with dogs winning. Dogs have won with above average. Thank you guys. That was awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for taking time to jump onto this learning session. This has been our last learning session for this phase of the project. However, we look forward to more that will come in the future. And we can't wait to share it all. The presentation and everything that Mike has used, we're going to have that shared. Again, every student will have access to that, and everyone who has attended the session will have access to that. Otherwise, have a good afternoon yourselves and a good day to all those on the East Coast. Bye-bye.
Hi, guys. Thanks so much.
Yeah.